Rise up, the Dukes are back, and now it's time to rise up. The crew is back, and now it's time to rise up. The Dukes are back, and now it's time to rise up. Rise up, rise up. The Dukes are back, and now it's time to rise up. The crew is back, and now it's time to rise up. The Dukes are back, and now it's time to rise up. Rise up.
And we're back for another episode of the D's on Fire podcast. It was a great week up until about, I don't know, a minute ago. Is that how much time's passed since that foul call after the missed layup has gone by?
Pretty much.
Yeah, Duke's fought hard. I honestly didn't expect them to consistently dig into it. That was noticed in the Charleston game too, and Stony Brook, where I'll say this is the second half of the Charleston game. The amount of swings that our team's gone through with the runs seems to have died down, and it's now just more consistent play, which is encouraging because now you're not as streaky of a team.
Yeah, the Charleston was that first half collapse was infuriating to watch. But yeah, these last two games were more consistent. This consistently behind in the Princeton game, unfortunately. But I mean, I think they played really well in the second half to make it very close.
Yeah,
have a chance to win, literally.
Several. Yeah, and it was great defense. They didn't do too many early fouls at the end of the game too. They trusted their defense, and it worked. They were able to turn Princeton over when they wanted to. They just, I don't know what adjustments they made, whether it was full court pressure or what, but that end of the second half, they really buckled down defensively.
Yeah, is that how we're gonna do?
I mean, it's
go to
it
the,
just
the first game.
We have to talk about it.
That's fine.
All
we'll
that's
do
in my head.
PMT style Sunday Night Football first. Yeah, I mean, there were times in the first half where, especially that I've never really seen the 3-man like triple team zone that they were doing on the ball handler. That confused me. Just to like, I've never seen a defense like that before, but it was working. It really confused the Duke's offense.
Yeah. I mean, Princeton's known for creating schemes, the Princeton offense being the first, and now this new style of defense. It's just, I don't know. They're effective. I don't think it can be used throughout an entire game, obviously, but it'll definitely throw a team off seeing it.
I think coaches more and more are just switching up things just to give you a different look, just to make you think. Doesn't get you kind of out of rhythm on offense. So I don't think like they didn't do it consistently, but they did it 4 or 5 times, and it's a sign of a well coached team. Especially we just lost to a bunch of white nerds.
Well, not all white.
I mean, they 4 out of the 5 starters were white. That's too much white.
I'll say this. I liked at the end of the game that we were driving to the basket and weren't settling for threes, because I think if we settled for threes and missed it, the one day one, that it really looked like it was going down.
Oh yeah, that was in and out. Yep.
That if you miss those threes, that could just kill any chance of coming back. Whereas you're driving, you're picking up fouls, you're chipping in that way. Even if you miss on a shot like that, your team still seems in it. Whereas you miss that 3 and they get the ball and are driving and everybody's on their heels, it just feels that much more deflating when you're trying to come back.
No, I totally agree. I think I don't know if that's just a viewer thing, but I think that's felt in the game as well. Like, it just takes the wind out of the sails way more than it feels like a better attempt. You know, you're closer to the basket, so higher probability of it going in, right? So makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah. And your boy Dixon, man, did he get hacked a lot in the second half tonight. I think he got hacked, didn't draw fouls, and then learned to start flailing around a little bit too. I'm not going to say he was wrong to do that, but I noticed a lot more oomph in him falling to the ground. Uh, about what?
I think in this game specifically, the refs were calling those types of things. There was a I remember distinctly the day foul on the left hand side of the court in the second half. And he was very frustrated with the foul call. He was just up in the guy's grill, wasn't really dribbling, and got a foul called. Rozier did something. He got a foul drawn on that like 50-50 ball that kind of he kind of insinuate or exaggerated the contact a little, I'll say, on that. So I think in this game specifically, the refs were kind of allowing that stuff to get called.
Yeah, almost encouraging it because, like I said, there was some contact made where no calls were made, but
Right.
anytime somebody showed that there was contact, whether there was some or not, that seemed to be the trigger for the whistle.
Yeah. But I thought it and Damprod's been pretty consistent. We have now 4 games of evidence. It's Barre starts for about 3 to 4 minutes in the first half, comes back in at some point in the first half, and then Dixon is the one who starts in the second half, clearly on purpose. Um, I think both are. I don't think you can make one argument over the other. I think Dambrot probably trusts Dixon a little more just because he's been closing games and he was closing. This is the first game that's been close. Um, so I think that's obviously says something.
Yeah, and the Drames have brought a lot of energy off the bench. I He talked about it after the Stony Brook game that one Drame's been like the third best player on the team behind Dede and Trey, and I can't argue with that. I mean, he was 5 of 6 against Stony Brook, and then he started the night off hot again tonight.
Double in Stony Brook, I believe.
Yeah.
Fusini.
So he's adding a huge element to our game where he has some dribble skills. So he's a 4 that can dribble like a 3, and that's a huge offensive advantage because now we have with Sarasov is able to go to the basket, Drame is able to go to the basket, Dede, Trey, all able to go to the basket when they need to if they have a mismatch. And there's not going to be 4 guys that are better at guarding than they are at driving to the basket. That's just not going to happen.
No, I completely agree. It's really just changed the archetype of this team compared to last year. We just didn't have anyone like Savrasov, Fusini, Drame, Twin, Hassan Drame, like all those guys with the size and speed that they all have. Like they can all guard probably 3 through 5 and can play at the 3 on offense. So it's Fusini especially. I mean, he deserves a lot of praise. He's been the most consistent player, I'll say. Yeah, I'll stick with that.
Yeah. And then Savrasov, the first half shots weren't falling. Second half they did for him. When he's on, it's scary how great our offense is. And even when he's missing the shots, he still looks good because he's getting good looks. It's just, I don't know. He's got to work on the touch a little more, or I don't know. It's there. We've seen it. It just needs to be more consistent, I guess.
I think it was there's been so many. Normally, we don't have 3 games to talk about in a podcast, but I'm trying to think.
The second half of Charleston was his best half, I think.
Yeah, so that's what it was because I remember in the first half he was just very hesitant. You could tell that he was hesitating with shots that he would probably normally take, and wasn't taking good open looks. And then Charleston, he started to find his shot a little bit more. Stony Brook, he had a really good game. And then this game, I mean, he went 3 for 8 in the Princeton game, but he wasn't looking for his shot early on in that Charleston first half. So he's progressively getting more confident, I think. And I think a lot of it, I mean, he was the number 1 guy on his team last year, and now he's like at best 4 on this team. So he's kind of probably figuring out his role. But I think in a few more games with him, and he'll figure that out and be a even better addition than he already's been.
Yeah, and last year the T-shirt was Joe Reese. His quote: "They had us last." This year, it would be the day timeout call against Charleston.
Ah,
That is
that was amazing.
so many people flocked to Twitter saying that Charleston's going to come back because of that call, and they did go on a run. But the fact that they couldn't, honestly, the Dukes seemed better conditioned than Charleston. That seemed like the biggest difference. It seemed like Charleston was gasping for air, and we were just outrunning them in the second half of that game. But Day was able to retweet the CBS Sports videos of him calling that timeout in Kelsey's face. The announcers were shocked, bewildered that there wasn't a technical called, which, I mean, there should have been. I'm going to be honest. But
There absolutely should have been, yeah.
eh, it was good advice, too. Coach should have called the timeout
I
like
love the
5 minutes
celebration.
earlier.
Yeah, no, I love it. I mean, yeah, from a basketball standpoint, I guess you have to call a technical foul on that, but as from a fan's point of view, that was friggin' awesome.
Chef's kiss.
Yep.
Yeah, that was beautiful. Stony Brook, I tweeted it from our account. I was never worried for a second in that game because Stony Brook,
No.
the athleticism is there for us. We have enough skill, and the hustle was there. I wasn't even worried about the energy. I talked to my brother who was at the game with me. The only thing I have to worry about with our team is our focus being there consistently, because those lapses are when we make mistakes, like not guarding well enough defensively. Tonight, I don't even think there were many defensive lapses. Definitely not in the second half, which is
This was a well coached team, I think.
yeah. It was just a really good game.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was.
No, I completely agree.
I mean, neither team had too big of a lead in this one. They both teams seemed buckled down, and it was just who could make the shots, and we missed that last shot. Yeah, and then defensively, I still can't believe they pulled a shot clock violation on that second or third last possession against Princeton. I cannot believe that happened.
It was weird. I guess it was Day who got the ball, and then one of the defenders like had a pinky on the ball, so I guess that was he didn't have full possession of it. So I guess that's the only thing that I could see where that was called a jump ball, or excuse me, a shot clock violation.
Yeah, what was it? Didn't Kim have one? They drew 2 shot clock violations in the last 2 minutes of this game.
I think it was Lee who
Lee.
he just forgot how much time there was, and like, he didn't even get a shot up. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what's going on? And then
That's how locked in this defense can be. And you said it with Stony Brook, like if they're locked in. Stony Brook was really the most impressive like offense and just the game as a whole on both sides of the floor. I have written in my notes no fouls for Trey Clark at the 9:28 mark in that Stony Brook game. So if you're locked in and you don't get in foul trouble, specifically Trey Clark, I mean, this team's going to be tough to beat.
yeah, the one downside this past week was Trey Williams with his finger injury in the Charleston game.
He knew right away.
Yeah. Although they said he's only supposed to be out for like another week or so it's not too serious. But Dambrot mentioned that this is a bad thing for them in the short term, but in the long term, this is great because you're getting these guys, young guys, more minutes to hopefully develop and be more prepared for when they needed them later on in the season.
Yeah. Do we know if it's his shooting hand or not?
So I'm trying to remember. I think it was his left hand from the camera angle that
I'm thinking left too, just off the top of my head, but I can't confirm that.
Yeah.
But
I mean, I think he uses both pretty often with his little baby.
Right, he's more of a one-handed jump hook type guy, so
Yeah.
won't be turning to his left, I guess.
Yeah. Won't be shooting those corner threes quite as often as last year when he shot about, I don't know, 5, 6.
Yeah. But you're right. I mean, most of the it'll give guys to a chance to step up, give Barre and Dixon more minutes to, I guess, figure out how much to allocate to both those guys. And I think it was the Stony Brook game where we had, maybe it was Charleston, I can't remember, but Fusini Drame playing the 5 a little bit. I like that lineup a lot.
Yeah.
I think that's something to explore a little bit more.
I mean, there's just so many different combinations that we have with the different amount
Yeah.
of players we have. In depth, true depth, where Rozier's on the court, great. If he's off the court, then point Trey, all right. Kalen Nichols, who came on in the Stony Brook game, he looked decent in his limited minutes. Made the bucket on his first shot. And Coach Dambrot said most years he'd be getting minutes, but he's just stuck behind some really amazing guards this year. So he's not going to get as many as he probably should. And what was it? D. Michelle got some minutes tonight. He looked okay. Nothing too crazy, but he played when the game was still close in the second half.
Yeah, the three at the end of the half was obviously a big momentum shift in that game. He's looked okay. I mean, he's only playing like 3 or 4 minutes a game when he gets in there, so can't really make any sort of conclusions when it comes to his play, but not too bad, not too great.
Yeah. One player we haven't seen yet, Matus Hronsky, have to think that he's probably not going to get more playing time as the season goes on. So that might be a guy that either needs to find his role within the team, or maybe he'll end up being a redshirt this year. I'm not sure. But that's the only player I can remember thinking some expectation of seeing what he can do after an off season, and I haven't really seen him play yet.
I think just like you said, there's too many dudes.
Yeah.
There's just too many dudes that can play ball on this team. It's a real shame that not everyone can play ball. But in all seriousness, I mean, as I said before, like at the 3 position this year, it was a huge weakness last year, and now we have so many options. And that's probably what Horonsky would be playing.
Yeah.
Unless he's like a small ball 4, which we have guys for that too. So it's a loaded position this year.
Yeah. Yeah, and it really is crazy. Savrasov can play the 5. We have Dixon, Chabi, Trey when he's back can play the 5. He's mentioned a Drame played a 5. Like, there's so many different lineup options. It does stink to lose, but even with the loss, I can't be too discouraged with what we just saw tonight.
No, I thought it was really. I was kind of shocked that, especially when I would say like 4 seconds went off the clock at the end of the game, that we didn't foul. And then somehow we were able to get a turnover in that craziness, and we got a very, very good look at the end of the game. And like you said in the beginning, went to the basket for it. We're only down a bucket. I think last year this team would have shot a 3.
100%.
This year, I thought Trey Clark was going to shoot that ball, and he saw that I think it was Fusini who got that shot wide open on the right hand side towards the rim. Had a good look, just missed it. It stinks, but it was really disciplined basketball towards the end of that game.
Yeah. We did end the game with 1 timeout. I was thinking they were going to call it once they passed the half-court line. They didn't, but it was partly because they did have such a great look because he was wide open on the right side. Um,
Don't want the defense to get set. I mean, yeah, I was totally fine with how everything played out. Just bucket didn't go in.
yeah, uh, I I know from a player's perspective that Dambrot and all the players have to be thinking, what what did they do wrong this game that could have made the difference? There's really not much. I mean there were some turnovers. Uh, in the first half wasn't as clean as the second half. Obviously, it seems like we're a second half team. Really, I mean this past week alone, College of Charleston better in the second half. Uh, Stony Brook better in the second half. In this game better in the second half. So that's great for the coaching because it's showing that we're able to adjust during the game and get the guys refocused and locked in and really ready to finish this game every game.
To your point about second half points, Duquesne and Charleston game, 57 compared to 33 in the first half. Points in the Stony Brook game, 35 in the first half, 50 in the second half. And then this game was a little bit closer, not as drastic as those, but 31 first half, 36 in second half.
Yeah.
So yeah,
And I'd say the biggest difference between the first half and second half this game was defense too.
yeah.
So, and I'm sure that translates in the scoring.
I think with this game, the biggest, probably the biggest weakness was just letting a lot of shots at the rim. Princeton shot 54% from the floor. They were just getting a lot of stuff in and around the rim. We shot kind of poorly, 43% overall field goal percentage. And both teams made 7 threes, so it wasn't like a shootout from three. I think it just came down to who shot better.
Yeah, and there were some Princeton players where
Shocker in basketball,
Yeah.
who shot better wins the game.
not always the case.
Not always the case, but
A lot.
not shocking.
Yeah. um, I'm trying to think of how I want to phrase this. There were some Princeton guys that if they had an open look, you knew it was going in. Martine was one of them. I was very happy to see him get into foul trouble late in this game and have to get out. And then what was his Peters? Those two guys,
Yep.
if they had any space whatsoever, you just knew it was going in, and that was a little deflating.
It was the Alacoco.
Yeah.
Shot 10 of 13 with 23 points. Had the highest points in this game, so that dude was on fire. But all the other categories are pretty even, like 23 rebounds for Princeton, 24 for the Dukes, 12 assists compared to 11 assists, 6 to 7 steals. So really just came down to who shot better in this game.
This is weird. This time last year, I was excited because we played a bunch of weak teams and looked good and won games, and we had offensive firepower, and defensively I saw a lot of room for growth. This year, there's not many obvious ways that we can get a lot better. It's just small things like those small pockets of focus and mental lapses. I really see
Focus, I think probably team chemistry just overall, just kind of figuring out what lineups that you like, what guys that you want to play together, kind of like that Fusini at the 5, like who should we surround him with in those types of lineups, or the Trey Clark and Rozier kind of staggering those minutes, things like that. Once we figure those things out, what we like, I think this team is better than last year.
And the announcers did mention that Day-Day's definitely playing more of the off-guard role this year, not having to play any point guard minutes with those two, kind of being the one whenever he's the two out there. That is going to be the tough question, is to figure out what is the actual best lineup we have. And you mentioned last podcast episode, it might just be matchup dependent. That might just be how this team goes.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think with size, you could combat it one of two ways. You could just go small and try and outshoot that team, or you're gonna have to put more. Maybe just go all big lineup and kind of have both the dramas out there. Have Hassan be at the two, be basically the two guard. Have Trey at the be the one. Things like that. I think you're right. I think it's gonna be matchup based.
Wow, that would be. I don't know how great our offense would look in that super big lineup, but yeah, that would be a gigantic lineup.
I'm thinking like a lineup like Trey, the dramas, maybe
Harris,
Williams out there and Dixon.
yeah,
It's enough shooting. Fusini's been shooting well. Hassan's the theoretical better shooter. Um, you know, just off the top of my head, I haven't really. I think next podcast I'll come with some numbers now that we have 4 games to go off of.
yeah.
Oh well, it'll be 5 by the time we talk again.
That's true. And the women's team, after their opening loss, won the next 2 on the road. I was very excited going into this season about how good they could be. They haven't shown the potential that I was kind of expecting going into this year yet. They've played a lot of close games against teams I thought they'd be kind of blowing out. So the pick game's going to be interesting. It's going to tell me a lot, I think, about how good this team can be. We'll see. That'll be the first big test that they have this season.
Like you said, they're all on the road, so this is, to me, they're probably all big tests, most likely.
That's a fair point. I mean, three games on the road to start the season can't be easy, but there's just so much firepower from a shooting perspective and from an offensive talent perspective, and they haven't been able to break that 60-some point. Sorry, folks. They haven't been able to break that 60-some point number yet. They haven't broken to the 70s. I was hoping to see some higher scoring like they had in the NCAA tournament year where they were able to get into the 80s pretty consistently. Lemon 80 used to be a thing where you got free lemonade if they got 80 points or more. We need to bring that back for the women's team to try and get them up. Guys' team, I'm confident we'll be able to get more than 80 points.
Did I get an email? I forget what game it was for dollar beer night.
Yeah, that's the Women's City game. That's Saturday.
That's what I thought. Oh man, I wish I was there.
Yeah,
for basketball reasons, of course.
Of course, yeah, definitely not for the dollar beer. We went. I told my brother about that. He looked at the beer choices they had. He's like, I don't know which one's going for $1. Because
what do you mean?
They have Helltown Brewery, which is like a local.
No, yeah, I like Helltown.
Yeah, they're a localish place, and they've got good beers, but they're not going to be going for $1. I can't imagine. And
I don't know. I mean, they said dollar beer night. It's got to be. You got to live up to their to
what you think
to the word.
Duquesne Pilsners are brought into the stadium to sell for $1. Maybe Keystone Light, Natty Light.
Maybe dollar Iron Cities.
Yeah, they got Bud Light, the Helltown, and then like Coronas. Maybe
that sounds right.
There's a third option there, but the beer that they were selling for the not dollar price at Monday's game was like the big boys, the big boy cans. Right. So they can't be selling those for $1, even with a special deal. Like that would be nuts.
Well, does your brother plan on going to that game, or are you going to that game?
I'm gonna try to go. We're juggling some kid activities that weekend. So
sure,
I'm gonna try to get Archer to go, and hopefully he'll like it a little better with less people and less noise.
To be clear, not for the $1, just for the dollar beer.
Yeah, that's all he's going for. Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
He got a foam basketball when we went to the guys' game on Monday, and that was his second half enjoyment, was bouncing the ball to his uncle and me, and he got a lot of ahs and oohs as he was running around with the ball in his hands. So
love it.
Yeah, he really knows how to win the crowd over.
That sparked something. Did you notice anything that you didn't like that you can't notice on TV? Being there in person.
No, we had to stay pretty high up because he didn't want to sit down at all. And me with far vision is not nearly as good as it once was. But no, it seemed like it was basically similar to last year, where they're just so athletic and so tall, and it's always better to see that in person to truly appreciate it.
Always, always.
But no, there wasn't any really small things that I picked up on. I tried to look at the bench to see if there was any differences in how they reacted to things, but everybody was engaged. Um, I made a joke. The guy that got me the tickets, we went to a game together last year, and it was the Indiana State game, and a lot of the guys around us were pointing out whenever Indiana State players' jerseys were untucked, and I said I'd point out anytime somebody's jersey was untucked. They all stayed tucked. It was by far the most disciplined tucked jersey game I've ever been to in my life. So I guess that was what I noticed being in person.
That's got to be like what the last guy on the bench's job is, to just make sure guys' shirts are tucked in at all times, or maybe like one of the trainers or something. Someone's got to be on top of that, I guess.
Yeah, and I brought it up to my brother, like, this is nuts. Nobody's jersey is untucked, and we're 10 minutes into the game. And he's like, I think there's a foul for that now. And I can tell you, there's not, because I saw many Duquesne players tonight have jerseys untucked towards the end of the game. They didn't care.
I mean, we're in 2023. We need to tuck in our jerseys. It's kind of a ridiculous rule to begin with.
It is. I'm not disagreeing with that. I was just more amazed that it's 2023 and they actually had them tucked for.
No, yeah, no, they're both are true. Both are very true.
So, yeah, that's the big topics. Did you have anything that you wanted to focus on any of the games? I mean, we talked in a kind of a big broad sense tonight, in part because I can't move past the game I just watched. That's a big problem for me.
If you want to, depends on if you want to end soon, because I can just go through some notes that I think are kind of funny.
Oh, let's go through it all. I'm down to go.
I have Charleston game note. Trey Clark is him. I feel like that says enough.
Yeah, there's a true debate as to who the alpha is on this team, or the Batman, and who's Robin, between him and Day Day. And I don't really care what the answer is. They're both great. I'm happy about both of them being on the team.
I'll do like I alluded to earlier. I'll do just whatever interests me in terms of a statistic deep dive. But I have Ken Palm up right now, and I'm looking at Jimmy Trey Clark is the 25th player in college basketball in steal percentage. So that's a teaser for the folks, I guess. 7.2% steal percentage, 25th in the nation.
So he's starting off slow this year, is what you're telling me. He's not giving it his full attention yet.
Yeah. I will say in this Princeton game, he can be frustrating to watch. I think this Princeton game was probably the most frustrating I've seen. The foul calls don't really bother me. I'm actually pretty used to that when I was watching Matisse Thybulle on the Sixers all the time, and they're very similar players defensively. You just kind of have to live with the gambles, and if they're fouls, they're fouls. Matisse is totally different because he wasn't also the best offensive player on the court. So that's kind of the frustrating part, I guess, with him.
Yeah, the turnovers are always going to be the most frustrating thing for me, and I'm sure the most frustrating thing for Dambrot when he's out there. There was one, I think it was Stony Brook. He just threw it across court attempting to throw it to Rozier, and they had two guys ready to intercept the ball for that exact pass. And there was no need to try and rush it up.
Yeah.
And that happens a few times a game. And he more than makes up for it on the offensive end.
For sure.
But yeah, those are the things that can be sometimes really frustrating to see.
The first thing that I think of was in this game we just watched in Princeton. it was late in the game. We're down. Maybe I wrote it down. Let me see.
I know he had back to
Yes,
back.
at the 5:55 mark. I think we were down by 5 for what felt like an eternity in the second half. Um, Thinking to myself, okay, we're down by 5. Like, we just need to stop, and then it's one possession game. Um, Trey Clark, balls on the left hand side, gets swung over to like the left hand side of the arc. Trey Clark tries to jump the pass, um, totally whiffs, and the guy it was passed to has a wide open 3 and makes it. And now it's an 8-point game. Like, things like that, where that's at the 5:55 mark. Like, we're down by potentially 2 possessions if we get a stop, or 1 possession if we get a stop, and you're gambling in that situation where probably I I think by that time we forced a shot clock violation. Like, have them make a tough shot instead of gambling on things like that and being a hero.
Yeah, and if there's one offensive style you don't want to jump to try and steal, it's a Princeton offense where they're doing backdoor cuts all day, every day, and twice.
Which they did a lot of against us. But they do it against a lot of people, so I'm not even really, you can't be too upset about that. That's something you can control. Just be in front of your guy, pick your spots. That was a bad spot to pick.
Yeah. Hindsight says bad decision. 100%. In the moment, I know you still thought bad decision, but hindsight.
No, I wrote it down
verifies.
immediately. Like, I was like, but before the shot went in, I was like, that was stupid. This guy, he has a wide open shot, regardless if it goes in or not. It's wide open.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm trying to read some funny things I wrote, but I guess we can give a little bit more love to Fusini. He's just, like you said, arguably the third best player on this team. Had, what do you have, 15 and 11 against Stony Brook.
Yeah, and like I said, very efficient on the shooting that night too. I think it was like 5 of 6.
6 of 7, yeah.
7. Even better. One thought that I had watching after the Charleston game, Trey Clark has the ability to make the G League and stay playing professional basketball in the United States.
You think so?
I think so. Day-Day,
is that like being
Day-Day,
talked?
sure.
I don't know who would talk about that. That would be like credible.
No,
I don't know.
I know.
That's just your thought.
That's just my thought, because I've seen some actual
I don't hate
NBA
it.
talent in the A10, and he is what 6'3" as a guard, and plays, or no, I think he might be 6'4". Anyways,
6'3" it says on ESPN. I don't know if that means anything.
6'3", but he also is athletic enough where he plays bigger than a small 6'2", 6'1", 6'3" guard. So
that's plenty big enough in the NBA for nowadays.
Yeah, and for that to be a point guard, I could see him staying in the States and being good enough to travel around on the G Leagues and maybe get like a 10-day, because the Richmond guard, Jacob Gilliard, he's on a 10-day right now in the NBA. I think Trey Clark could be better than him.
I think you're right. I don't disagree. I mean, I'm not, I've never really been big in the NBA drafts, so I don't try to claim to be a scout of talent. But he seems to be athletic enough, seems to be gifted enough. You can just see from his play from last year, like, we saw glimpses of this potential, and it was kind of a bigger debate of Batman Robin with him and Day-Day, but I think he's clearly cemented himself as Batman this year in these first 4 games.
Well, I think the athleticism makes him have a much higher potential. But I mean, Day-Day's, it's tough to say Day-Day hasn't been playing just as good, because he's been lights out offensively.
I don't want to diminish what Day-Day's been doing, but because shooting is very I mean, it's probably the most valuable skill you can have in basketball, obviously, but just Trey Clark's overall well-roundedness of his game with the passing, the defense, improving his shooting from last year to this year. Just his overall game, I think it translates more to like a professional level instead of just being a shooter. And I still think Day Day can get to the hole more than he does, but he's a jump shooter. I mean, and he makes really tough shots. He made some really tough mid rangers tonight. Like I think I wrote down like he's a tough shot maker. So that's a big skill as well. I'm not trying to diminish Day Day. It's just if we're talking about the next level, like those are the differences.
Yeah, I agree, and I'm not giving the same projection to Day Day that I think I can easily see him playing in the NBA on a 10-day contract. Although it'd be cool to see, but I can't. Trey's athleticism and his defensive ability makes me think that he has a better chance of catching a scout's eye.
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
Let me think. Are there any players playing now that you think would not be able to play pro ball over in Europe? I don't think that. I think this roster, in its entirety, has players that are good enough to play pro ball overseas if they want to.
Well, that's kind of a trick question because we have multiple professionals, right?
That's true. We do. You're right. A lot of the Eastern Europeans that we have on the team did play some pro ball.
No, I know what you're saying. I was just kind of they mention it almost every broadcast. Like this guy's already played 3 years of professional basketball. I think with is it Neckis?
Yeah, Jakob Neckis.
Yeah. With him especially, they just bring it up every time he comes onto the floor. But no, I mean everyone's very talented on this team. I think you're absolutely right. It says a lot about how far this program has come.
And Neckis is a prime example where he was projected to be a 3 based off his skill set and his playing time in Europe. He comes over here, he's a great stretch 4. And I think he's played some minutes at guard, and he can play all over defensively. He's got super high potential too.
I like him getting a few minutes a game. I think that should stay. I haven't seen anything where he doesn't deserve those minutes. I think he gives us a little bit. He reminds me a little bit of RJ Gunn, except he's a lot smarter on defense. No offense to RJ Gunn, but I remember I wrote down, I think it was a Stony Brook game, like he made an incredible rotation play when I think Trey Clark got beat and he rotated towards the rim off the 3-pointer. Like off ball defense and rotating like that at the college level is hard to do, hard to recognize. And he does it with these pretty regularly. So things like that, like he's a really smart ball player.
Yeah, I think I've remembered a key block by him in every game too that I've seen him in those limited minutes. I like seeing him on the floor. He's not going to be a negative when he's out there.
Yeah. Yep. Trying to see if there's anything else on my list. I think we, in a weird way, in the jumping around way that we had this week, this is by far the most amount of games that we've had to cover, I think.
Yeah, and by far the most disorganized. I thought about keeping notes. I really was going to watch back the Charleston game in particular and take notes, and then I was just like, no, I've got to watch too many games this week. I watched 3.5 halves of women's basketball. I watched all of the men's basketball games. I watched football, which was disappointing because we had a chance to clinch sole.
That's the one thing that I took. Eagles were on a bye. I took the weekend off. I was like, I'm not watching, and it was a bad slate of games, so I was like, I'm not going to watch any football this week, and it was actually really liberating.
You needed the refresher. You needed the bye.
I did,
just
yeah.
As bad as the players did.
Yeah. Now the Sixers are pretty good. I'm literally watching. They just lost to the Celtics again, or not again.
You beat them the first time around. It's all right.
Well, it is again. I mean, they own us. You didn't hear me actually say that, but
yeah, we'll delete that. We'll go back in that.
Yeah, we'll cut that part.
Yeah. But Pat Bev seems like a fun addition to your team. He really does.
It's funny you said that. I literally texted one of my friends. I was like, Jaden Springer played a lot in this game, at least in the first half. I didn't watch the second half because we're recording. He's going to take Pat Bev's minutes. So sorry, Pat Bev. I like the emotion that he brings, but he's not that great at basketball.
He's a good bench guy. He's one of those bench guys that you keep around for like 20 years, like Juwan Howard or Udonis Haslam.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
The bench and be glue guys for the team.
And I remember him like on the Clippers. He was a good 3-point shooter. Like I think he was high 30%, but I haven't seen him make a 3-point shot yet. And they've been well short. They're like ugly. So he doesn't shoot a lot. Doesn't make them. Jaden Springer. He's going to take his minutes. Mark my words.
In talking about Philly basketball, I'd really regret it if we didn't mention that Villanova lost to University of Pennsylvania in a shocker in the Big Five tournament that was going on. Yeah.
And I watched them get totally shellacked by St. Joe's a few days before that. I had that game on after. Stony Brook was Friday. So yeah, that was Saturday night. I saw a little bit of that game.
College Charleston was Friday. Yeah.
Oh, Charleston. Okay, then yeah.
A10 is looking good so far this non-con. I'm sure there's going to be quite a few on Twitter that are going to be saying Duquesne ruined it. We were having such a great non-con.
Yeah. Oh well. Hopefully, by this time next week, we can talk about a big win against Nebraska.
Yeah, and it would
not to overlook. Who do we have on the schedule next? Ryder.
Yeah,
which
they lost by about 20 or 30 to Nebraska in their last game, so I feel okay about that one.
That could be a look ahead spot, as I just did, but I only did it because I was doing from this time next week.
Right,
we have Nebraska.
It's hard to have the players look ahead whenever they just lost. Like if they'd won tonight, I would think that there's a much higher chance that they'd look ahead past Ryder.
Right.
Yeah. From the A10's perspective, we're looking good. Dayton looks good. The team that was up in the top 5 or 6 last year that's not looking too good. Fordham. Those flopping punks. Not looking too good right now.
It's just facts. We're just talking facts.
Yeah. The New York teams in the A10, Bonnies and Fordham, not looking the best. That's all I'm saying.
That's all we'll say.
Yeah. Can't wait for conference play. God, I love A10 basketball. All right. Anything else before we close it out?
No. I think next week we'll be better about previewing the next game, but I think we had plenty to talk about tonight, so no need to preview the next game. Plus, we have a big game to talk about in Nebraska next week. So, but we'll, I think, get a little more consistent on how the podcast plays out.
Yeah, a little
from here
more
on
structure,
out.
probably.
Yeah.
You don't want to go another 40 minutes and just try to do a preview of Ryder off the cuff?
Yeah, no. I think that would be real worse podcasting than we already do.
Pull a mixtape. All right.
Be here for another 3 more hours.
Yeah. Casually. Just thinking it's over and then, what about this? And then we'll go on a nice 20-minute tangent.
Yeah. I mean, I could have gone a lot further with the Sixers talk, but I'm sure people their ears would start bleeding. So
I think about a third of our fan base is probably good Sixer fans.
That's generous, but okay, sure.
All right. And with that, folks, we'll see you next week. And as always, Go Dukes.
Go Dukes.
The Dukes are back and now it's time to rise